Hello everyone, welcome here on Wellcode, and today we're gonna talk about how I became a software engineer and how I got an offer to work at Facebook. So if you have any kind of questions, drop them in the comment sections and me and my team of experts will answer them. Today is time for a little bit of storytelling. I'm gonna share the whole story from how I started learning how to code with zero experience and how I ended up going to Facebook in New York and having an incredible experience over there. For those of you who don't know me, I've been doing coding for 10 years now. I worked with people, I taught people how to code for the last 8 years. We created a mentorship program for all the people who are in different domains who want to switch the careers, want to improve their lives and become programmers. I struggled a lot in my past, especially coming from Romania where I didn't have lots and lots of opportunities. And I wanted to create a way, an easy way for people to learn how to code and become good programmers, because we have a very big problem in our age with the internet. Like, we have easier access to information, but because we have access to so much information, we don't know how to filter it, we don't know how to find the right information and the information that helps us get results. So today you're gonna hear more about my story, about how I did it, and along the way I'm gonna share with you some tips about all those things. So starting off, just as a disclaimer, I haven't had any kind of prior experience before school. So I didn't take any kind of external coding courses. And my first encounter with coding was somewhere in the 6th or 7th grade. I don't remember exactly. So I was very passionate about video games. I was spending hours playing those games. But I had a problem because I was sharing the same computer with my parents. So I didn't have that computer just for myself, but I had a limited amount of time. And at some point, I wanted to create my own video games. And because both my parents were programmers, I asked them how to create video games. And first, my dad discouraged me. He told me that video games take years to develop, there are multiple people working on them, and you need to have lots of experience. And he succeeded. He discouraged me. I think first I told him that I want to create video games after I played my first video games, I think in the 3rd grade. So I thought, well, this is something that's not for me. My dad says it's difficult. He used to do programming, so that means that I shouldn't be doing that. But afterwards, in the 6th or 7th grade, I started playing a video game, an online video game with races. The game was called Trackmania. And at some point, I wanted to build my own server. And the game offered an in-game option where you could create your own server, but you didn't have rankings. You just had racers joining your server, and that was basically it, compared to the cool servers out there which had rankings. You could see who finished the track the fastest and personalized things like that. So I wanted to install that program, and at some point I wanted to learn how it was built and how I could improve it. How could I create my own program for hosting servers, for hosting Trackmania servers? So I asked my mom to tell me where can I start learning how to code. So she gave me a book. The book was about Pascal, which was one of the first programming languages that was used for teaching. But then I had a very bad experience because I opened the book and there was no mention of video games. There were only text, code examples, and from time to time there were black screens with white text on them. And I felt very discouraged because even though I started reading the book, the things in there didn't make a lot of sense. The things there seemed like they were written for people who already had some coding experience. And for me, coming from no background of coding, I didn't understand the basics. Probably that book was too advanced. So I decided to stop reading that book and to quit coding for good. I thought that this is something that's not for me, that you have to be very smart, you have to have good teachers. And then 8th grade came, and in Romania, the country where I come from, you have to choose a major, you have to choose a specialization for your high school. So you can choose between math and computer science, between other kind of sciences like physics, chemistry, and biology, or you can go on the humanics side. This is something that I think it's unique here in Romania or in Eastern Europe. So I started analyzing my options. So growing up in the 2000s, we didn't have lots of opportunities in Romania, and one of my biggest dreams was to have a gaming computer that could run all the games on high settings. But the problem was that my parents wouldn't buy me such a computer, and honestly, I don't know if they had the money at that time to buy that computer for me. So I realized that I needed to earn money in order to buy that kind of a system, which was a problem because those systems were not expensive, were not cheap, sorry, and most of the professions at that time in Romania were paying minimum wage or close to minimum wage. So I could either become a programmer or a doctor or some sort of lawyer. Those were the professions that were paid a decent amount of money. And the obvious problem with becoming a doctor was that I would get my first salary only after 10 years of school, which was not acceptable for me because I didn't want to have a gaming computer when I was turning 30 years. So then becoming a lawyer also sounded difficult. It seemed that not everyone got clients, and it was sort of an unknown area for me. I didn't know any lawyer. My parents didn't know any lawyers. So then the only option was for me to go and pursue a computer science major in high school. So because I had good grades, I was accepted in a high school which had a major in computer science. Actually, it was the second best high school in my city. I had the grades to get accepted in the best high school in my city, but the second one was closer to home, so I decided to go there. And I was very enthusiastic about learning how to code, even though it was my second try, because at this point I was having a dedicated teacher just for computer science, and I thought that I was about to learn a lot. However, things were not like that in high school, because even though we had the major, even though we had the specialization that we needed to pursue, we had other subjects as well. We had a super strict math teacher. We also had to learn in other subjects, and the reality was that at that time teachers were paid very small salaries. And because salaries in programming were so high at that time, most of the computer science teachers were not real programmers. They either didn't find a place to get hired, they didn't find a company that would hire them, or they were just very old and most of the times outdated. So we were starting to learn how to code in the 9th grade, but a very frustrated thing was that we were learning how to code on paper. So the teacher will write the example code on the blackboard, and everything that we did was just to transcribe it and trying to understand it. And at that point I realized that what I was doing at school was not enough. So I picked the book that we were studying at school, and I started studying it on my own at home. And things didn't make a lot of sense, but I kept trying. I kept trying every day of my high school. Like after the first week, I was trying to read what was coming next in the first weekend, and so on and so forth. And at some point, the teacher told us to buy a book of exercises. Remember, this was a written book. Every exercise was on a piece of paper, and there was no way for me to evaluate my solutions to the problems in the book, but every day I tried to pick a few of those and I was trying to solve them. And because we were 30 people in the class, 30 students, the teacher did not have time to work with every one of us. The teacher did not have time to evaluate what we did, especially if we worked additional problems. So sometimes she would check what we did for the class, sometimes she checked the homework, but she did not check the additional problems that I was solving. And I had some sort of stupid pride, and I didn't want to work a lot with my parents. I thought that I will be able to prove my dad that I will create my first video game, and that it was not so hard, and that I could do it without his help. So I started solving problems from that book of problems, and at some point I finished everything that was in there, and we started using the computer at school. We started going into the computer science room and to use the computers to write code. Obviously, the code that we were writing was very easy, but the good thing was that I was starting to write my own programs and to run them on the actual computer. Now, the problem with that was that we were doing very basic things, and this was after 1 or maybe even 2 months of coding. So we already spent a lot of time learning the basics, and the problem was that I didn't understand most of the things. I wasn't among the smartest people in the class. I was somewhere in the middle. But because I wanted so much to get that gaming computer, because I wanted so much to play games on ultra high settings, I didn't quit on my dream, and I kept working. And what I realized was that I started becoming better. Every day after we moved to the computer science lab, every day after we made that transition, I was rushing home. Immediately after the classes ended, I was rushing home because I wanted to get back home before my parents got off work, so I could use the computer to train, so that I could use my computer to write my tasks and make progress. And at some point I finished all the exercises in that book, and the next part was the Olympics. So because my dad was a math teacher at that time, he pressed me a lot to go into the math Olympics. And every year, starting from the 5th grade until the 9th grade, I got terrible results. Like, I think I got around top 3, but not top 3 from the beginning, but top 3 started to count from the end. So I was among the bottom 3 worst students in math. And that was something that was very discouraging, but I loved competition. I loved playing basketball, even though I didn't score lots of points, but since I was very young, I loved competition. So then at some day, the computer science teacher came to the class and said, hey, there's this competition going on. Who wants to participate? And I raised my hand, and me and a few of my colleagues started preparing for the Olympics. And things improved a little bit because we transitioned from solving exercises from the book to solving exercises from the previous years, exercises that were given in the previous years at the Olympics. But the problem here was that those exercises were super difficult. I had no clue on how to solve them. I was struggling every day, and a lot of times I was rushing home. I was thinking about how to solve an exercise, and no ideas were produced by my brain. And that was something that was very discouraging, because I was spending days without feeling that I was making too much of the progress. Fortunately, I had no other alternative. So because I had no other alternatives and I already decided that I want to become a programmer, I kept persisting. And now looking back at those times, I realized how many mistakes I was making back then, because I had this stupid pride of not asking my parents, not working with them, maybe only when I was super stuck and I had no clue how to move forward. And also because I didn't ask my parents to get me a private tutor. So I was constantly banging my head against the wall, and a lot of my colleagues at some point started making fun of me. They were telling me that I don't see the sunlight, that I just sit at home and writing code like an obsessed person. At some point they started making jokes about me being addicted to writing code, but those jokes only started when I started surpassing them. At some point I became the best in class at coding, and don't imagine that I was solving difficult problems or creating real-world applications. No, I was just able to solve the easy problems that were given at class somehow faster than how my colleagues were solving it. So the next part was that the day of the Olympics has come, and I placed around top 10 in my city. I think I was the 7th or 6th place among all the students from my city, and my city is the second largest in Romania. So it's a city of, I think, over 300,000 people. And I felt very proud. I felt very proud because, first of all, it was the first time that I did something well. It was the first time that I was able to get a high score in any kind of contest, no matter. Even at gaming, when I was playing online, I was losing 90% of the time. And this was my first win, and I felt very good about it. And second, I solved one problem perfectly. So I was given two problems, two tasks. One task was solved completely. I solved 100% of it. And I think the second, I solved 50% of it. So I got 75% total, which was incredible. So then the next phase came, and it was the first time that I qualified at any kind of Olympics to the next phase, which was the county phase. And the best scoring students in the county phase go on the nationals. And I wanted to go on nationals. I don't know why, but I put up my mind to it. I made that a very clear goal. And at that point, I started neglecting the other subjects at school. Instead of me doing my math homework or my Romanian language homework, I was just working on my coding skills. However, I was still training in a very bad way. I was just solving problems on my own without any kind of evaluation. And most of the times, because I'm not a very detailed oriented person, I wasn't checking my solutions carefully enough. I wasn't testing my code in a careful manner. And that was a very bad thing, because I could have caught a lot of mistakes that I was making. But anyway, the day of the county phase came, and at that point, I was feeling confident. I knew that I surpassed most of my friends, most of my classmates. Actually, I surpassed all my classmates, and it was time to surpass them again at the county phase. And at the county phase, I got two problems. I solved half of the first one, and I thought I solved the second one completely. And at some point at the end of the contest. The contest was 3 hours long, if I remember correctly. A friend of mine who was sitting across me was looking somehow puzzled to me because I finished early. I think I finished 1 hour before the entire time. So for the last hour, I was just looking at the walls and looking really bored, and probably also had some sort of arrogant smile of my face, like, hey, I beat you all, I finished early, and I'm gonna go to the nationals. And he asked me if I finished everything, and I told him, even though this was cheating, I don't know what the teacher that was supposed to take care of that not to happen was doing, but anyway, I told him that I solved half of the first problem and that I solved the second problem completely, with a proud smile on my face. And what happened next was that the smile was erased because he asked me how I solved the second problem. The time was almost up, so I told him, and then he pointed a wrong thing that was in my solution. And at that point I panicked because I realized that my solution was wrong. I tried to make some adjustments to get some points, but I realized that no way I'm gonna qualify with only 50% of the first problem solved and the second problem not being solved almost at all. So I rushed home, I locked myself in my room, and I started crying because I knew how to solve the second problem, and I felt that I was so close of going to the nationals, and because I didn't pay enough attention to what I did, I failed, and I felt that probably that was my last chance of qualifying, and I felt very discouraging, and I think I cried for 1 or maybe even 2 hours. And at some point my mom enters the room and tells me that, hey Petru, you qualified for the nationals. And I was looking with the tears under my eyes. I looked at her in a weird way, and I told that it was some kind of mistake because I knew that I didn't perform well in the Olympics. So she told me that I qualified because one friend of mine sent me a message that I got into the nationals. I went to the computer, Yahoo Messenger was open because that's what we used back then for communicating, and I saw the message, and I told my friend that he was wrong, that there's no way I could have qualified because I didn't score high enough. So he sends me the link to the standings, and I was the second place. He was on the first place, and there was the word qualified next to my name. And at that point, I think that was the happiest moment in my life because I qualified to the nationals. That was a very good prize based on the amount of work that I spent. However, that happiness will soon fade, as you will see next. So afterwards, I went to the nationals, and there was a disaster. I got 0 points in the first day, so I solved 0% of all the problems. And then in the second day, I started, or actually before the second day, I started talking to the other students who qualified. I made a lot of friends there. And the thing that I realized was that they were above me. Like, they were so good. They knew so many things that I didn't know at that time. And what I realized was that most of those students were training with really good teachers, and I was among the only students who were training on their own, who didn't have any kind of mentors. And actually I got there because of luck, because I made mistakes. I had below 50% score, which is not something that you can be proud of, and in my opinion, you don't even deserve to go to the nationals if you don't score at least 50%. And I was super disappointed that I scored only 0 points in the first day, and I made a commitment to get the best training and beat all the others. So from there on, my journey was beginning to to get easier because I got mentors, and I started training with them. And next year I got a silver medal at the nationals, and then I also scored top 10 also at the nationals, and I was very close to make the national team and qualify for the International Olympics. Anyway, after high school, there were a lot of students who were applying to those internships at top companies. I was seeing on Facebook all those people who went to San Francisco, took pictures with the Golden Gate Bridge, who were going to New York and to all those cool places in the United States. And for me, coming from a small country in Eastern Europe, those things were mind-blowing. So my next goal was to get such an internship and travel to the United States. And I started preparing for those interviews. And in my first years, I got interviews at all the major companies because they liked my resume. They liked the fact that I went to the Olympics. I also had a personal project, and I got interviews. My first interview was at Twitter back then, and I got rejected. I got rejected, and the funny thing is that I was so stressed before that interview that I couldn't sleep the night before. My next interview was with Microsoft, and same thing happened. I was rejected and I was very stressed. And in the end, I ended up getting rejected at every company that I applied to in the United States. I got rejected by Microsoft, by Twitter, but by Google, but by Facebook. I think I might even have applied to Yahoo and other small names, and everyone rejected me. And at that point, I realized that I need to go back to what I did very successfully in high school and get some good mentors, get some good teachers, so that I can make some progress in such a way that I will be trained but by some people who got internships before me. Because a very important thing when you're training with someone is that that person that trains you should have already done what you are planning to do. So for example, if you want to work at Google, you need to train with someone who at least got a job offer at Google. Otherwise, both of you won't have any idea about what you have to do. And it's like you are walking blindly in woods and you need to make your way out without a map and without being able to see. That's how training feels when you're not training with someone. So what I did next was to ask an old friend of mine who was working at Google full time back then to train me. I asked my friend, and he pointed some resources from which I could train, and we also did mock interviews. And during those mock interviews, I realized that I knew so little, and I realized what were the areas that I need to focus on. Moreover, I learned that I lacked communication. A lot of times during coding interviews, it doesn't only matter to solve the problem. A lot of times you can even not solve the problem, but be a good communicator, have a good vibe, understand the hints that the interviewer is giving you. And if you solve the problem, and even if you don't solve the problem, you can still get that job offer and get hired by a big company. So that was what I did next. And the next year, I got offers at every company that I applied. I got offers from Google, from Facebook, from Microsoft, and I think those were the companies that I applied to. And from all the offers, I chose the Facebook one. First of all, because it was in New York, so I wanted to visit New York since I was a very young child. And because I wanted to do that so badly, I chose New York, even though Facebook's main office was in Menlo Park back then. I think it's still there. And a lot of friends recommended me to go there, and I didn't listen to them, and I chose New York. And also I chose Facebook because it was a product that I was using daily to watch photos of my friends who were interning at Facebook and were visiting the United States. And it just sounded cool back then to work at something that all of my friends were using, and that I could tell them, hey, I worked on this exact thing that you are using. So this is how I got hired at Facebook. If you have any kinds of questions, don't forget to drop a comment, because I'm gonna answer those questions. And now in the end, I want to give you a quick reminder. We have a free program for you. So if you want to learn how to write code, if you want to become a programmer, go on wellcode.com, create a free account there, and start learning. We are trying our best to create such a program that brings you results, a program that not only teaches you some kind of syntax, or where you are just reproducing things as from a book, but it's a place where you will write your first programs, and also you will be able to think in code. That's our purpose at Wellcode. So go on wellcode.com, create a free account there, and start learning, and me and my team of experts will be there on the platform to answer all your questions. I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm very glad that I was able to share this with you, and I hope it will give you some direction, especially if you're a beginner, and also some motivation. So I wish you have a great day, and that you will become a good software engineer.